Are we recording now? We are, huh? So you're going to cut all this shit out, right? Okay.
So, Roni, I was wondering if we could start this conversation by talking about your books that exist only as books, where that is the form for the work.
I'm trying to remember if it's the first time I produced a book or was heavily involved, but I think it was. It was the first volume of this ongoing series called Two Place, right? And it was like 1989. Now, what preceded that was like 10 years of photographing without an agenda in Iceland, not knowing what would come out of it. And what preceded that was 10 years of travel in Iceland without a camera. So I could get a sense of the place. Because once you have an agenda, you're looking for something, and so you don't see anything else. So when I finally said, okay, you know, I could start to photograph, that kind of came intuitively after many, many years. I came up with a thought to start to pull together certain aspects of Iceland. And part of the idea was to execute this over my life, not over the next year, or the next 5 years or whatever, but I actually just let it pace it to what my life is. And in other words, it would be a series of books, that's all I knew. And it would be around this idea of identity relative to place, and to place being a verb, so we keep everything active. So the first volume was a very simple collection of drawings I had done called Bluff Life. And I did these up in a lighthouse, not thinking I was going to publish them or anything, and they were kind of doodles, really, but it worked for me. But the point for me was that all of these books didn't have any other outlet, all of these photographs. They were just, I thought to myself, these photographs are really intended for publication in this format. And I started to develop that idea. And I went through 4 volumes before I got to something called Harold's Daughter. Harold's Daughter started out as a portrait, a kind of portrait of a place through a woman's face. I traveled with Margaret for around 6 weeks throughout Iceland, shooting her in all the onsens and all the naturally heated pools, swimming pools, hot pots, whatever was there. And when I went home to start to develop the book, I thought, this is crazy. This is an experience. This is an empirical, you need to make a photo installation. That was the first photo installation. So the books were before the photographs, in a sense, right? Or photo installations. It's called Harold's Daughter, and the photo installation is called You Are the Weather.
Yes, which we've all seen.
Right. And that's, the 100 photo surround kind of horizon.
So the book came first.
It did, yeah. The book came first. That was the intention. That's where the sequencing and that whole relationship, that kind of the need for a sequence, let's say.
We must talk about that.
Yeah. And then that became, in 1994 or 5, a photo installation, right? And the books after that weren't always associated with anything but themselves and that idea of two place. Most of them have material, or some of them have material that's not reproduced anywhere else, and it doesn't really belong anywhere else, at least of now. But as my program, so to speak, developed, I did discover a few books that were a few ideas that were intended to be books. One was called Another Water. When I finished that, I realized that, when you with a book, you start at the beginning usually, and you go through the middle, and you wind up at the end, which is appropriate. It gives order. And since these were footnotes, everything was flowing in that form. But then I thought, well, you could do an installation of this, provided you can hold somebody's interest through the writing, which is relatively easy because you just describe a lot of dead bodies and suicides and shit like that, and people look for that stuff. But then you can slip in a few other ideas. So the installation, first of all, was a radical edit down to 15 images, which is extreme. Without, I had probably 500 to 800 images that were of interest to me. So I got that edit and I laid in the footnotes. And the idea was that a person is not likely to go from one image to another reading everything. They're just going to float down here or there, pick up a little and go for as long as they're interested.
Exactly.
And walk away.
Yes.
So that would be a different experience. And I liked that possibility. But then when I finished that, I thought, look at all these fantastic images. We don't need any text at all. So then I did a work called Some Thames, which is another photo installation with 80 photographs. And the work is designed to be hung in a hotel, throughout a hotel or a building complex like a university.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Is it this size?
They're 4 feet, roughly the same size as still water, 3.5 by 4 feet, something like that. And so you have 80 of these framed images now, right? And I was invited to install them in northern Iceland in a little town called Akureyri at the university there. I became friendly with the headmaster there, and he allowed me, let's say he enabled the commissioning, so to speak, of this work for the university complex. Quite a few buildings. So I ran these 80 images through the classrooms, through the bathrooms, through the halls, through the maintenance areas, through the library and the cafeteria. So if you're a teacher, you have one flow. If you're a cleaning woman, you have another flow. If you're a student, another flow. And nobody would have the whole thing unless they decided to seek everyone out. There was no map to it. It was just discovery as you move through your daily activity, wherever that took you, that part of the river would be visible to you. And it was a form of monumentality that was kind of invisible. So I liked that very much. That worked for me. So that was Some Thames. And finally, right, I said, well, the text is kind of nice, and maybe I could pull it off without images. And that became the monologue, Saying Water.
Oh, I see.
That was the evolution of those parts,
So it had 4...
Yeah, 4 incarnations, so to speak.
Yes, amazing.
Yeah.
And at first, it was just the book that we have upstairs.
Correct.
Another water.
Another water, yep. Yep.
And the second was?
Still water, yeah.
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 And the third?
Some Thames.
Some Thames. And then?
Saying Water.
Yes. Okay, got it.
Four titles.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this one, Some Thames, is what went into colleges and?
Well, the University of Akureyri has one. Believe it or not, the owners of Hyatt Hotel, the Pritzkers.
Right.
From the Pritzker Prize.
Yeah.
One of the Pritzkers placed the complete work on a floor in her Chicago offices, which was fascinating experience because, you were installing them over Xerox machines or near the bathroom.
And you didn't care. You loved it.
No, I just wanted to kind of give a coherence to the whole. Yeah. With all the differences that are, all the different activities. But it was an interesting social experience because I had some people come, it was an open office plan. Some people came up to me and said, I don't want any photographs in my office. Fine. By the end, everybody had photographs in their office. They all wanted 1 or 2 or something like this. But, and that body of work was very, very meaningful to me. And that really was aside from Two Place, that was really an important artist book for me that I still think of it as a key work. And then you have a book like Weather Reports You.
Yes.
Now, that's a collection of interviews. This book came out of Library of Water.
I see.
And Library of Water was that work I did up in, it's kind of a permanent installation in Iceland where I've collected all the glacial waters, right? Well, Weather Reports You was kind of a part of that project. So we were collecting interviews of the local people just talking about the weather. And it's the weather is an interesting thing to talk about because it often is a way of talking about yourself. You know, it's you have this, when you talk about the weather, you talk about yourself. And especially now that it's not really part of the small talk options because the weather is becoming so prominent in everybody's life. What I tried to do there was collect stories about the weather told by individual inhabitants, with, in a sense, creating a collective autobiography of a country. If such a thing could possibly exist. You see, everybody is referring to more or less the same thing, but in the difference being their own experience of it, you know.
The format and the production of it is very different from all the other books we see that may have, including your own, no?
Yeah. Well, you know, things have to be what they are. I mean, I never really worked so much with style. It's not about style for me. It was getting a collective portrait like that, you know, through these interviews. Yeah, it's a textbook. It's a small textbook. We took little photograph just wherever the interview took place to give a sense of the place without getting too, you know, aesthetic or anything like this.
Yeah.
But they're really, some of them are very funny and some of them are shockingly sad. You know, it covers every nuance of emotional range, you know.
Yeah.
People's relationship to the weather is often too profound to speak of. And I noticed, like not in Iceland, I tried to do it in Japan. There was a point where I had commissioned interviews, and when I was reviewing them, I realized that either we weren't asking the right questions or we weren't engaged. You know, your stranger is coming up to you.
Yeah.
So the problem there is some cultures are more open to that, like Americans would be and the Icelanders are, because they love to bring you into their home and just whatever, very open, right? But some cultures aren't.
No.
And I had this fantasy that I was going to go like, okay, we're going to do India, we're going to do the monsoons, and we're going to do like some Middle Eastern desert.
Yeah.
You know, just get a feeling for how people talk about the weather.
Yeah.
But even though you're hiring people who are from the culture, some cultures are really resistant to getting beyond objective facts.
Yeah.
They don't talk about anything personal, but often the weather is very personal. They just, people don't talk about it, you know, like some people get depressed when there's no daylight and they don't want to leave the house. Not everybody's going to talk about that with you. Or, you know, their father going out to fish and not coming home because the weather, you know, all of that kind of stuff. Well, Icelanders go there, but we had a very hard time getting that beyond like, oh, well, it snowed a lot that year. You know, beyond the obvious observations.
Roni, there was this amazing box set you did.
Oh, yeah.
Of four writers.
Right.
And Carson.
Yeah, and that was Wonderwater Alice Offshore, which is where I had asked a number of people to annotate my titles.
Yeah.
So I gave them the list of titles and I told them, look, you can write about all of them or as many as you want. You can ignore however you want to do it, you know. And that was more or less the instruction. So from that kind of landscape of titles, you got Anne Carson, who basically wrote a kind of novel.
Yeah.
And John Waters,
Yes.
who made an a priori decision he was going to respond to every title with a film proposal, a one-line
Yeah.
film proposal.
Yeah.
Ellen Sixu, who was very, very playful, as she is in the way she works with language and philosophy. And finally, Louise Bourgeois. So these very disparate voices attending to the same landmarks, so to speak, you know, all addressing. You're going down to their zero and say, okay, you know, whatever the title, you are the weather, let's say.
Yes. That would be amazing to reprint also. And that's not difficult to reprint.
No, it's it's a series of textbooks. It could probably be done even simpler.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's out of print, but
It's out of print since many, many years. So I don't have a copy of that. I had seen one here, but now it seems to have disappeared.
Yeah. So that was a very interesting project to do, and also Art Angel got involved with it, and they helped me to bring the four writers together. Louise didn't read her writings; she had a stand-in, but Anne and John and Ellen came. We did a reading up at the Whitney, and then we did a reading in London. The texts are often quite funny, so it's actually one of the rare moments of entertainment that I offer my reader, pure entertainment. But so that was, and that again is such a different form.
Yeah,
because I'm just giving you the bare minimum to build on, giving the actual author. You know, I can't remember how I described it. It's Alice, Wonderwater, Alice Offshore, annotated by Anne Carson, right? So that would be one volume.
Yeah.
So my name was sort of in the frame of it, but not in the center.
Yes, which was also wonderful.
Yeah.
That was lovely. So Another Water was a book, and a book is tied to its sequence. But then when you decide to choose 15, you completely break the sequence. And to me, that's a great part of bookmaking, to build a sequence and then to find a form with which you destroy that sequence. But somehow I need to go through the building of the sequence to be able to destroy it.
I think that's basically what happened to me in that process. Maybe, you know, I always think of it kind of as a discovery process. I always like to start from zero, which isn't always possible, but and it's maybe an idealistic thought, but every now and then I hold on to that possibility of not bringing in all the baggage of other work, or it's sort of impossible, but it's such a big break normally from one work to another in the way I work. It's easier for me to find a space which is very separate from what preceded it.
Yeah.
You know, and when I install work, I like the idea that an individual would come into a room and begin there with whatever it is that's there, and the next room as well, and the next room. So it isn't like one room prepares you for the next room, you know, because it doesn't happen in my work. And I think the more conceptual it's become, the more options I have, because I can go to any material or form, and I have that a little bit more leeway. Even as a visual artist, I've always thought that that's not quite right for what I feel or what I think I'm doing. Visual art is a little too circumscribed for me, you know?
Right.
this idea of just doing things that exist in books. I mean, there's Her the Breathe at Home, which is I think I told you the first digital photo work I did.
Yeah.
And it's just this simple collection of images of this painter, Storval, his name. And he painted this one view, pretty much. I'd say 90% of his paintings, or 85%, are just this mountain, Her the Breathe.
Right.
Which is in the area where he grew up, but it's in the center of Iceland, and it's kind of considered the queen, the queen of Iceland. This is a very beautiful table mount, and it's exactly 1 mile high, right? If you want to see it, you have to really make an effort. It's not by the road or anything like this, But what I noticed since I'd been traveling for so many years in Iceland, that this image of the mountain was all over Iceland. And of course, it was obviously the same author, because it was a very kind of, not stylized, but it was kind of a so-called outsider art style, where it was just a self-schooled person painting something he related to for most of his life, I often would be invited into homes, and of course there would be a Storval, and it would be, in pretty much any place you can imagine, above the kitchen sink or in the workshop, piled up with like 3 or 4 of these paintings stacked, and I just photographed them in situ, as though the domestic space they were in, or the industrial space they were in, was their new landscape. So, and again, it was just a very, very pleasurable thing to do. First of all, it's like I tend to be a little voyeuristic, so I got to see how a lot of people were living.
Yeah.
And that was interesting. But it also, I wound up traveling around Iceland, because they're pretty much everywhere in Iceland.
And then Steidl printed that book, no?
Yes, we printed it direct. We corrected the digitals.
Yeah.
And then, it went directly into the book. There's no other form.
Yeah. So while it's, of course, fascinating to think of works that only exist as a book, there has to be now a book of the 4 iterations of Another Water, no?
Well, you might have to make that one, because I think you're already well experienced in that form.
Yes,
yeah.
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
Because then it's as though making the book frees one to think beyond the book. And then who knows, you might still go back to the book at another, like I might suggest to you to make a book of all 4. So then you're back to the book again.
That would be fascinating.
And we don't know what comes out of that.
Right? Yeah,
it could be a calendar that goes into all these schools and colleges. No?
Yeah, with the sexiest water in town, man.
Yes. People love, in India still, people love very much to have posters which you can buy on the street of the Swiss Alps. And so why not something from Iceland?
Right. Yeah. I would love to have done like the Mekong. I would have, there's a beautiful river in Iceland. Beautiful is the wrong word. Skaftá. It's an Icelandic, it's a glacial lake, a river. And it's opaque. It looks like cement.
Really?
And I like that idea of photographing water which was completely opaque. It's very disturbing to be around. You fall in, can't swim, you can't see out of the water.
God.
You know what I mean? So it's
no, I don't.
And animals, and there's no visibility in the water because it's opaque.
Yeah,
it's not transparent.
So I would die just from that.
Well, no, but it's threatening in a certain way. I feel one of the things that interested me in the Thames is it was this very muddy river.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was muddy, but it looked like shit.
Yeah.
So, and there was a lot of human waste and everything else in there, but that darkness is different than the chemicals that come from the glacier. And that are opaque.
Yeah.
It's a physical darkness, but it's not a psychological darkness.
Okay.
Like, in the Skaftá, I don't think there would be one dead body.
But you didn't photograph it.
I did, yeah, but it wound up in a different project.
Okay. Yeah, that's the other thing, no? I loved what you said at the start. I wish I could put it on Instagram for all the young photographers who would be following what you say. But the thing of you spend 10 years without an agenda.
Yeah.
Then 10 years photographing without an agenda.
Exactly. And then discover, okay, well, this could be a way of getting at the verb to place.
Yes.
You know, over this period of time, you have action.
Yes.
Right? And you have change. Those are the two things I was kind of thinking about. And that's where the whole series of To Place comes from. Yeah.
Fantastic. That's such a great lesson. Yeah. Walter Keller tried to tell me that, and I listened to him in the early 90s. He said, just photograph. Don't try to make books or exhibitions. Right. They will drain you of your energy. Right. And just build your archive.
Right, yeah. Well, I found I did that organically. There's just a lot more material in there. And at some point, I mean, for about 15 years, I was drawing heavily on my experience in Iceland to generate new photo installations. There was Pi, which was this, also a four-wall surround. Pi, P-I. Some people call it P. You know, the mathematical figure.
I've seen that.
Yeah.
Pi.
It was shot along the Arctic Circle in the north. Mm-hmm. To talk about it simply, it was a collection of cycles and circles. So you had the Arctic Circle, even though it was invisible, it was the underlying. And you had the harvest cycle in there. And you had a soap opera, daily soap opera in there. And you had the cycles of indigenous animals.
What form was it?
It's the finished work is 40 photographs. Mm-hmm. You know,
but not a book.
No, it's a book too. The book is called Arctic Circles.
Okay, I haven't seen that here.
It's in that series To Place.
Okay.
Yeah. So. And, you know, many other Becoming a Landscape and Her, and Her, they're all coming out of Iceland. Mm. And those are now starting out as photographic installations and becoming books afterwards.
Right.
So it's for a while it seemed to reverse.
Yeah.
And then I found myself not traveling to Iceland for a while. And of course things shifted again. So because I did really think of Iceland as kind of a muse or a quarry, you know, like a place to go get your source, to get your materials, you know, and stuff.
Yes.
That's how I was with Iceland.
Yeah.
And I still feel even though I haven't been there in a while, it's totally altered my way of being in the world too.
What are the sources? I mean, Iceland was definitely
was the big one. Well, you know, it's hard to really to know. I always feel like I'm making up stories when I try to nail down my influences. Yeah. But, you know, I definitely think classical Japanese culture is a huge influence on my work. You definitely see it certainly in the sculpture. I think Italo Calvino had a big influence because he was just like, okay, now I'm going to do a comic book, and tomorrow this is going to be a serious critical or this is going to be whatever he wanted to do,
and that's what I like about Jeff Dyer.
Okay, yeah,
it could be anything. Apples.
Yeah, but his style is not. Is his style that varied as well, or is it really just the subject?
No, I think not as varied as Calvino, but quite varied.
Okay.
It's like what he gets interested in the apple, I think, and then he finds the material, and then the form develops from that.
Yeah.
So it's not, there is no Jeff Dyer style. If there's a style, it's to not have a style.
Right. And, you know, you'd also look at somebody like Gerhard Richter, that I very much admired his ability to navigate whatever form of visibility he wanted to express, you know, because he had that level of technical expertise and he wasn't afraid to share it, you know. He's so facile that it's irrelevant. And then you look at like a Francis Bacon, where every second of his painting is like a risk taken, you know,
Yes.
because there's nothing reversible in his painting from the way I feel it. You know, it's a very unmediated and transparent way of working that he has. So it's right and wrong, you know, and getting at it is high risk all the way. You know?
All the way,
You know,
yeah.
you can't no redos here or covering up anything.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah.
Yeah. So those things interest me. Architecture is huge in my.
I have to go to Neutra and
Oh, there was Schindler.
Schindler.
Yeah, Schindler.
Yeah.
But you know, like and Louis Kahn. When I was in graduate school, I learned about Louis Kahn, and he made a very big impression on me. Not just his buildings, of which Yale happened to have two. I think his first and last public commission. Also his writings. So he was really an important figure in my development.
Really? I haven't read anything he's written other than that famous quote, "Light didn't know what she is till she hit a wall,"
Yeah.
which is great.
Which reminds me, actually, of not Malcolm McLaren. Who's the car designer? What's his first name? Anyway, he said that speed doesn't happen until you're in an accident.
Yeah.
Or
Maybe he was inspired by Louis Kahn.
Maybe. Yeah, I'm off the road now. You better find a new path to take.
I think it would be invaluable, Roni, if we could make a book of the 4 incarnations of Another Water.
I'd love to collaborate with you on something. This is probably a really good beginning.
Yeah.
No?
It would be. It would be so great. I keep thinking about my part of the world, you know, to have something like that.
Totally.
What you've explained to me in this interview,
Yeah.
I had not put all those pieces together.
Yeah.
One of the works I don't even know.
Mm.
So then to be able to read it
like a biography or
Yeah,
something. Yeah, totally.
yeah.
Because it is like
Yeah.
this came first and it allowed me to do this and do that. Yeah, it's not like you can change the order there.
And the monologue is what you read in Louisiana.
Mm-hmm.
I have photos of that. Secret recordings
Do
of
you?
it as well.
Oh, that sounds good. I'd like to see those.
So that would be amazing. That would be great.
All right.
And
well,
that's a little project for me to do in Maine.
yeah, or wherever.
Yeah. Then you can make a fake of that book and the people can sell it at that street corner where the fakes are sold.
Right.
That is a true measure of people wanting to read you.
Yeah. Well, I still think they're going to choose Arundhati Roy, to tell you the truth.
She's written a brilliant essay today. I have to send it to you.
In the newspaper.
Her lecture, actually, the Stuart Hall lecture.
I would love to see it. Yeah.
Today.
Yeah. I like her voice a lot. I think I might even like her political voice as much as her literary voice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's very brave.
Takes no prisoners. She just, There's another woman who I really enjoy. Enjoy's the wrong word. She's trained as, I think, a physicist. And she's written quite a lot, particularly on seeds.
Vandana Shiva.
Yes. There you go. First of all, she's a great speaker.
Yeah.
But, the things she discusses are so extreme.
Yeah.
The theft of seeds, by Monsanto effectively and locking it down as a product, and the number of farmers that committed suicide in India as a result of not being able to use the organic seeds that they'd had access to all their life. I mean, this is just
criminal beyond. Yeah.
Yeats has this one line that when I was reading Yeats, and I still remember a number of them, and he says, "The wrong of unshapely things is a wrong too great to be told." And I think that is a seriously unshapely thing to deny.
You should send her that quotation.
It's just like, my God. Anyway, I think it's good to end on Monsanto, because you certainly can't start with Monsanto.